Hello, hi, hey, and welcome to my channel. My name is Liv on Venus. Today we're going to be talking about Just Pearly Things and Nick Fuentes' conversation. We're not going to be talking about Just Pearly Things. We're just going to go over what Nick Fuentes had to say in support of his ideas and his views. We know we live in America and there's a lot of white nationalists and white supremacists amongst us, but let's see what are some key talking points. He does not speak for every white person you encounter, but I'm sure there are some people who do agree with him and the things that he says. So let's talk about it. The idea of racial supremacy is not a new concept, but it is interesting to hear what the conversation is looking like in a modern context. So right now we're going to tune into this interview and find out.
Bring over a completely foreign population. They use a different alphabet. They use a different language, a different religion, different culture, different body language, sense of humor. It's just not going to be the same place. And it gets to this fundamental idea, and this is maybe this is another reason why I say I'm a true right-wing person, not a liberal, is because I don't think people are interchangeable. I don't think that Germans and Italians are interchangeable. They're not. They're different. They look different. They have a different temperament. Even if an Italian was adopted by a German, they would still be different. You know, they would still act differently than the other Germans, even if they spoke with a perfect German accent and everything, because there is something that's
biological. And so he's trying to say that there are biological differences between races, even though he's making a cross-cultural reference when he's using Italian and German. People have tried many times over to convince us that there are biological differences between the races, and this has been disproven by science. According to scientists, we all share about 99.9% of the same DNA with very little variation, although it could be argued that 0.1% makes a world of a difference. And that may be inspired by the way that we view each other phenotypically, because we see each other as so different in terms of our physical features, even though that's not necessarily true. Some could still argue that it's not just phenotypical, but also characteristics and traits that also go along with the phenotype. Things that cannot be seen, but things that are within us individually. And I don't think that Europeans want that kind of smoke, given their history. And that's a long-standing issue with white supremacy. There is not only the idea that there are differences, but that because of these differences, one is better than the other. That's where the confirmation bias starts, because obviously those who are running the studies with an idea that they feel like they have to prove, they're going to find ways to confirm the biases that they already have.
It is a tricky thing to sort of disentangle how much of it was learned and how much of it was sort of intrinsic, how much of it was innate. But I think you find when you look at countries, well, it's very clear, because America looks different than Mexico. And it's like, well, who made Mexico the way? And there's this argument, they say, colonialism made it that way. Racism made it that way. It's like, I don't know. I think, different people create a different kind of society based on their behaviors. And the point is, and that's really a repudiation of liberalism, which says that we're all a blank slate, that we're all the same.
Right. Well, like Germans, we're better engineers. All my brothers are engineers. And there's something biological with men and women, too, because, again, there's 10 kids, and we have 5 girls, 5 boys. And it's like all my brothers are engineers. I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's this frame of thinking that causes such a rift in the world, because when you bring your own supremacy and continuously try to colonize the world, inspiring people to think the way that you do, you never put value into the culture that other people have brought to the world. People have their own civilizations, people have their own culture, and not everyone is aspiring to do what you are doing. This idea of white supremacy and that the whole world should be indoctrinated with white supremacy and white ideologies is what's killing the world. everyone has the authority and the agency to live their life as they see fit, and it does not have to fit into your mold in order to be valuable. And these things are not meant to be in competition with each other. You're creating your own competition and then setting your own rules, and then judging people based off of criteria that you have set. This is that they are savages mindset in the 21st century. And this is something that unless white folks get over, that we're going to constantly be battling this. And these are ideas that other people are also going to take on, both internally and then externally, and it's going to cause more rifts. Instead of preaching that we should be in peace with each other, and if we're going to live in integrated societies, that we integrate all of our cultures and we see all of each other as equally valuable. Instead, we're trying to create a hierarchy in order to perpetuate these white supremacist ideologies, which are not true and have never been true, but because they have been pressed and recycled so many times over the last few centuries, people are starting to believe it's true. And this is not the case. These talking points are illegitimate because they were never legitimate. When you met Mexico, Mexico had an entire Aztec civilization. Cities, customs, trades, wealth. These people were doing perfectly fine, but then you came in, destroyed their civilization, and then turn around and say, well, I don't know why your country looks the way that it does. You want to say colonization. But yes, do you remember when California belonged to Mexico? When Texas belonged to Mexico? Before it was called Mexico? Like, these are things that cannot just be overwritten and all of a sudden you don't know how colonization affected the entire globe. Sir, get a grip. Not to mention that colonization was just step one. We still have the infiltration of the CIA in a lot of these countries and the civil unrest that America and other European countries have caused in these countries in order to keep a political edge over these countries. Can we talk about how the spread of democracy was something that was used as a tool for control over a lot of these countries that previously did not have democracy before? But because we say that democracy is the end-all, be-all, best way to govern a people, now democracy is spread across the world, but democratic values did not just come on its own. These were instilled, indoctrinated inside of these countries, also with white supremacy. These things are all interconnected and they cannot be separated because it's not just colonization, it's also imperialism, it's also democracy spreading using war and violence and disruption in people's current governances.
It was like more the environment because I would see the single mother statistics. So I would think, oh, it's more environment than biological because these kids are fucked up when they're with a single mom. But this changed my view on it because I had the two case studies basically in my own life because we adopted 3 teenagers. I mean, it's different because we didn't take them from babies, but like we had these 3 teenagers that were heavily influenced by us, but they still were not more similar. Even though they grew up in our family for a couple of years, they were not more similar than the one that we had no contact with till he was 30. And it's so weird. He has the same sense of humor. Yeah. He walks like my brothers. I was an economics major. He was an economics major. Like he is a sales software engineer. My mom was in sales. My dad was an engineer. It's all these commonalities that have nothing to do with how he was raised. So I really agree with you. There has to be something biological.
Yeah. Well, and to me, that's just like common sense. I mean, they have that expression, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
Right.
You know, what does that mean? And I get it. It's you have to have a case study like that and contrast because it is a tricky thing to sort of disentangle how much of it was learned and how much of it was sort of intrinsic, how much of it was innate. And
yes, let's use our sample size of 1 in order to prove biological racism. What are the chances that people have the same sense of humor? as people, as humans, there's literally like 3-4 ways that we've categorized a different sense of humor. So what are the chances that someone in your family has the same sense of humor as you? Very close. What's the chances that you and the next American, let's say, have the same sense of humor? It's also still pretty high. Our sense of humor as humans is a human attribute. And certain things that people don't find funny are usually because of experiences they've had. But people would technically have the same sense of humor if they're around the same type of people. The only thing this is really proving is how deep their desire is to prove that race is real and that there are biological differences between people. Any means necessary. Even if you only have a sample study of one person, and using happenstance or coincidence to prove it, really, sales manager, sales engineer, sales and engineer. Anyways, I don't want this video to be too long. Let's just end it here. Lasting remarks. Racism is real. Race is not real. Just because we look different and may act different and have different cultural differences does not mean that race is this thing that is so real that it should inspire some type of racial supremacy, neither black nor white nor Asian nor nothing, because these things are not real. Yes, we have differences culturally, even within your family. How do you explain how two siblings are so different from each other? Yeah, there are differences between people, but that's on an individual level. That is not a racial thing. There are cultural differences, but that's on a cultural level and not a racial thing. All right. Well, have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do you feel like race is real? Do you feel like there are racial hierarchies? Please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let's have a conversation about it.